too.
I always prefer that.
So Elwin, I got introduced to Elwin by a friend of mine, Philip McCluskey, and I followed a lot of your work. You've done High Energy Academy. You wrote the Easy Exhaustion Cure, which I've read most of on the online version, the PDF version, which is fantastic. It's just super easy to read, really simple. For me, it takes a lot of the complication out of things. So I really looked at Elwin as someone who has a lot of simple strategies for having good energy, healing the body in a particular way through what I like a lot of different Chinese herbs and simple strategies that get results. So today what I want to do is just ask Elwin some questions to give my readers and give anybody else watching this video just some hints on what to do and how to maybe sort through all that different data out there. Someone saying, like, this thing's bad, drink this and don't drink that and eat this food. And if you eat that, you're going to die. And if you eat this, you're, just kind of give some insight into how people can sort through the clutter.
Excellent. Well, I'm more than happy to. And by the way, when I say, do you mind introducing me, I never know where to start, and I hate self-promotion, so if someone else can do it for me, that's always better. So where do you want to start?
What's that?
Where do you want to start?
So the main question I have, which is interesting, is I noticed a trend. There's been people who have either been raw foodists for a really long time, or folks who have been vegan or vegetarian for a really long time. And I see this maybe threshold of people who are hitting a ceiling or a point where they don't know where to go. And they're like, oh, well, maybe I need to eat 5 eggs every morning, or maybe I need to eat like raw bison once a day, or maybe I need to eat, all these different, flesh foods or animal foods or different things. And I don't know that they're really being strategic about it. So I'm wondering if you have any insights on how someone can gauge where they're at and maybe some different steps to take, whether they're herbal or, if someone's experiencing low energy, for instance, and they're used to that vigor and vitality, because animal food does give you a certain rush, almost maybe like an adrenaline rush. So maybe you can offer some insight into folks like how to do that, not necessarily without animal food, but maybe on more of a plant-based diet.
Well, for a start, I think the most important thing about energy, which people rarely realise, is it has very little to do with food. If anything, food tends to lower energy in most people because it takes a lot of energy to digest. Okay, so not to say that we could live without food necessarily, right? But food is necessary for other things. It's necessary for nutrition, it's necessary for building ourselves up, but it's not really necessary for energy. I'll give an example of this that's very easily scientifically demonstrable. If you look at sports psychology, they talk about the Krebs cycle, right? And ATP is quite commonly understood. It's a fact that if a person is in an anaerobic state, right, which means that they do not have enough oxygen in order to be able to utilize energy, then they will produce an average of 2 units of ATP from 1 unit of glucose, right? If they are in an aerobic state, which is where they do have enough oxygen to utilize nutrients and convert them into energy, they can create up to 38 units of ATP from 1 unit of glucose. Now, up to, right, can be less, but it's still a hell of a lot more than 2 in almost every case. And so what we could take from that is actually we think of food, like that unit of glucose or whatever, as the base kind of unit of energy. But actually, that's just a modern Western scientific way of looking at it. When actually, if out of every 38 units of energy, 2 come from glucose, where is most of that energy actually coming from? And, as far as kind of logic tells me, and in fact, Taoism and ancient, systems of knowledge and health going back thousands of years will tell us it comes from the breath, right? The word for energy in Taoism, at least the basic kind of everyday life force energy, is qi. And it's actually the same word as air or breath, right? So we need to understand that the most primary nutrient that we have is actually breath. And if we are low in energy, it's probably because we are breathing in a tense, constricted, chest-based way, which means that we're not able to utilize oxygen very well. It's probably because we're not regularly aerobically exercising in the right way, so our body's not able to utilize oxygen even if we are breathing well. And so that's like the biggest stopping point. Now, like that's the thing to start with. That's the most
Right.
basic thing. Why are you even thinking about food? Why are you talking about plants versus animals? You know, I mean, it's irrelevant. Or you need to sort out your breathing and your body's ability to utilize oxygen. There's one animal thing which does relate to that, which is iron. Right, iron is one of the constituents that allows your body to utilize oxygen and turn it into energy. So I'd say in a certain small percentage of cases, especially with women, that can be where eating flesh foods can make a difference because it gives them a form of iron that they can utilize, and therefore suddenly their energy goes up. But most of the time, it's just a lack of simple breathing well, having fresh, good quality air, and doing regular aerobic training. That's the place to start. Not really food at all.
Wow. So even with that too, as far as like aerobic training, is there something that you recommend? I know a lot of folks, and myself included, I just ran a half marathon the other day,
Great.
and running is pounding on the pavement or pounding on a trail. So is there things that you recommend to your clients as far as aerobic exercise that are maybe less impact, or do you recommend running, or what do you usually recommend for that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a great point. I don't get that specific about it. I think it depends on where you're at. I personally like to use the cross trainer because, as you say, there's none of that impact. It's utilizing pretty much all the muscle groups in the body rather than mainly lower body. So that's the one that I like to use. But anything that you like, anything that works for you. I think the most important thing of aerobic exercise is to exercise in an aerobic way. Just because you're jogging or running. For some people, walking is anaerobic exercise because they're so out of breath immediately, right? For some people, like running quickly is easily aerobic. So the point is that you need to not get out of breath. That's the key thing with whatever you're doing. And I'd also give an honourable mention to some forms of qigong. Like I do a form of qigong called zhangzhong, which translates as standing on stakes or standing like a tree. It's where you hold static postures, basically, and it's incredible exercise for your muscles and your respiratory system and for your heart, whilst being completely stationary. And it really helps to build up your energy very strongly. And it's the kind of training that is taken by people who want to get to the level of things like empty force, where you can, like, say, hurl someone across the room and without touching them, that kind of thing. So it's incredibly effective. People think just standing there, that's the easiest thing in the world, right? But it's actually incredibly difficult if you're doing it in these particular postures in this particular way. But it's too difficult for most people, so I don't recommend that. But if I have very advanced clients who have clients who are like, yes, come on, next level, I'm really into mastery, then I might recommend some kind of qigong thing as well. But I think everyone can do some basic, whether, as I say, it's different. If you are out of shape, then just walking is going to be plenty aerobic enough for you.
Cool. So basically, just start where you're at and move up from there if you want to.
Yeah.
Awesome. So then after the breath work, say someone, I know it's theoretical, but humor me for a minute here. So after someone kind of takes care of the breathing and takes care of all that, what is it? Because maybe it's just in my head, maybe I'm making it up, but it seems like even when people try the breathing, they try the exercise, even especially when folks get into exercise, and I know they feel like they're still missing something. And
Yeah.
it almost becomes like this chasing. Do you usually focus on, say, the macronutrient level? Do you go into like carbs, protein, fat, that type of thing? Or do you get more into the nitty gritty and say, well, you need to focus more on, like you said, looking at maybe different sources of iron or looking at potassium or, balancing sodium, whatever else it is? How do you what's your entry point in that respect?
I'll teach you the exact framework, Jeff, which I use, from High Energy Academy. I think the thing that we start with, and more before anything else, is mindset, right? And it's also the thing that we end with, right? We have to start with it and end with it. Like, you start with it, you do your best, you sort your body out, and then you can actually really do well with it. It's true that it's really difficult to have a very good mindset if your body is very weak or toxic. But on the other hand, your body's never going to not be weak or toxic if you don't at least make an attempt to clean up your mindset. So it's kind of a tricky one. So we always start mindset, then we look at oxygen, which I already talked about. Then we look at hydration and electrolytes, sodium, potassium balance, magnesium, calcium balance. Then we look at alkalinity, right, as opposed to food in general. Testing it regularly, getting that at a reasonable level. The first thing in the morning, urinary pH is generally a good indicator, right? Then I look at tonifying personally, so adding in the herbs, stuff like that. Then I look at supporting the channels of elimination, right? Not detoxing, not cleansing, because all of that generally throws up a lot more than the body's able to deal with, but just the 4 exit paths of the body, right? The lungs, the skin, the bladder, and the large intestine, just keeping them consistently clear. And then when we've done all of that, I would move on to looking at balancing macronutrients, which then balances blood sugar.
Right.
that would be the order that I would do it in.
Wow, that sounds great. I mean, even with that, just right now, I mean, I'll go. That seems like that would pretty much handle everything, even after you get to the macronutrients.
Pretty much, yeah. The only we do a couple of modules after that in which I'm not promoting High Energy Academy, by the way, because it's closed at the moment. But in that system, because you're asking me about energy, we do a couple of modules after that, which are really about mastering your mindset and really cutting all the poisons out of your life, right? Not because you shouldn't, but because why the hell would you want to have them when they could ruin your feeling good? That's my perspective. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And you're right, when you deal with all those things, the only things that sometimes aren't addressed are like complicated hormonal issues. That sometimes need to be dealt with. Sometimes immune system issues, so getting parasites out of the body, that's kind of a later thing. I don't ever recommend that people start with that. They should do everything else first, because if parasites are systemic and chronic throughout your body, and you try and tackle them first, you are almost certainly going to fail and lose that battle, and that's going to be really disheartening. So it's important to get yourself to a point where you're really strong, or as strong as you can be, while having these saboteurs inside you, before you take them on and clear them out of your body. So that's another thing that isn't necessarily dealt with but which can be important. And then there's intensive cleansing. Occasionally people need to do full-on liver flushes, they need to do intestinal cleanses, they need to do full-on heavy metal detoxes. Those are probably the most common ones that I deal with. Things like getting mercury out of the teeth, for instance. If you've got a load, then that could completely sabotage your energy, right? No matter what. It's true, you could do everything else right. You could do everything else I said, and then have 16 mercury fillings in your teeth and still be low on energy. So there are a lot of things that can potentially go wrong when it comes to energy. But I'd say in 90-something% of the cases, just dealing with those basics, which I talked about, resolves it.
Beautiful. Awesome. That's really comprehensive. And then it's cool too, because when you talk about cleansing and that type of thing, that brings up a whole nother can of worms, so to speak, when you talk about, well, for me, my experience with different folks, they kind of get on this like cleansing kick where they want to do cleanse after cleanse after cleanse. Like most of the folks that I know, especially locally here, a lot of my friends, it seems like they're always cleansing. Do you think, I mean, I know potentially, yeah, you can cleanse too much. What do you think is a good frequency? I mean, I know it's dependent on the individual, but also it's like, some folks will say cleanse quarterly, with the change of the seasons, or cleanse the number of years of your life. If you're 32 years old, cleanse 32 days out of the year, broken up throughout the year. There's all these different ways of cleansing. Do you have any system or markers that you use to help people understand how often to cleanse, maybe for how long, or indicators to stop cleansing and to start eating again?
Okay, so you're talking about specifically the kind of cleansing which involves not eating rather than anything else?
Right.
Okay, so you mean fasting?
Yeah, fasting, but I mean, what prompted the question was you're talking about like a liver gallbladder flush or an intestinal cleanse, and I guess, most of the intestinal cleanses, my experience is with like a Rise and Shine or different intestinal, like psyllium and bentonite cleanses that are either 7, 14, or 28 days, and most of the time those are more effective when you're not putting stuff in as well. So maybe liquid cleanses, or not exactly fasting, but either smoothies or juices or water, somewhere in that category.
It does depend on the person. It depends on all kinds of factors. It's definitely partly on how strong you are, but it's also about how much of a rush you're in. I mean, why do you have to rush through? Why don't just do a little bit at a time? I think another important factor, that you need to look at with that one is really to be really clear on what result you want, right? And so if your result is to have an enjoyable life and you spend the whole time suffering, then that isn't great. Probably the most important thing about cleansing, which I think almost everyone misses out, although correct me if your friends are different, Jeff, is testing, right? To see if you're actually getting somewhere,
Yes.
Like, I know so many people who are cleansing and years, and as you say, decades and decades. It's like, well, when's it going to end, And I realise on one level cleansing never ends because there's so much toxicity in the world that it's true, you do have to regularly do a process. But assuming that you have been once unhealthy and now you're trying to get healthy, how are you tracking and testing that you're actually getting somewhere? That's a really important question. I mean, for me, for instance, one of the things I did in the promotional videos for High Energy Academy was I showed my live blood analysis, like 3 years ago and 6 months ago, right? Before, dirty, now, clean, right? So there's a time. improvement, right?
Yeah, kind of like the laundry detergent commercials, like dirty clothes, clean clothes.
There's all kinds of signs. There's like, the health of your nails and the health of your skin and the health of your hair. And it doesn't have to be blood tests, right? Hair
Right.
mineral analysis, that will tell you if you're getting better as well. If you're less depleted, that's generally a good sign, right? If your sulfur is higher and potassium and magnesium and on and on and on. So those are the ones that I like because they're fairly cheap tests and fairly easy, right? But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of tests which I haven't gone into, which other people do. The point is, wherever you've got a problem, like if you think you've got candida, for instance, everyone's always a candida cleanse, right? What are you doing to test that?
Mm-hmm.
Is it actually working? Are you actually cleansing candida out of your body, or are you just torturing yourself for a little bit, not letting yourself eat sugar, and then going right back to it at some point? Because
That's a really good point. I mean, that is a really good. I know you brought up the perfect example too, the candida cleanse, because that's like the buzzword. That's like as buzzword as raw food. Most people are like, oh, I'm on a candida cleanse. I'm not doing sugar, which like you said, it's good, but it's good to know the markers for that or the testing or to know if it's actually working.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, part of what I teach, I'm sure you're exactly the same, Jeff, in your coaching, is to teach people, train people to be aware, right, and vigilant as to what's actually going on inside them. So, yeah, a black and white, a photo of your blood or a little graph showing your levels of something, that's great, right? But the bottom line, ultimately, you don't want a pretty photo, you want a healthy body. So it's about being able to recognize that, how am I actually feeling? What symptoms have I actually got going on, and seeing cause and effect and correlation. So many people don't see correlation. I had a client, for instance, who's training to be a coach, and I'm not knocking her, by the way, because we all make this mistake. But for instance, just an example, because it occurs to me, she said that she had stomach acid, and it was excessive, and her doctor told her it was excessive, and she said, "What do I think it's related to?" And I said, "Well, you probably need to increase your alkalinity." And she's like, "Oh, I hadn't made the connection between acidity in my stomach and acidity in the rest of my body." It's like, how would you not make that connection? It's like seeing everything as interconnected, right? And as I say, I'm not making her wrong, because we all were in that place of ignorance at one point, and we're all in the process of learning, and we're all still ignorant about stuff right now. I'm
Absolutely.
sure. So but it's about let's get to that point of, and then obviously cause and effect, right? So many people. They come to me and like, yeah, well, I binged on this, and then a couple of days later I seem to catch some kind of bug from someone, I don't know, maybe it's at work, and like, whoa. I mean, I'm not into blaming every single illness on detoxification, because I realise that there is an organ, what do we call it, an opportunistic organism component to it, yeah? However, if you have just been on a stag weekend, or you had 3 days of, like consuming pizza and cakes all day, and then you get ill, can we please just be real and notice that there is that obvious connection, right? And maybe it's not cause and effect as in black and white, as in this definitely causes this, but there's a correlation, right? It's like before you spent 2 months not poisoning yourself and you didn't feel poisoned, and now you spend a week poisoning yourself, or a weekend, and now you feel poisoned. Can we see the connection? And I think when you do that, that's when the temptation to, as I refer to it, as you can tell, Jeff, poison yourself becomes less and less tempting, right? And we can step away from, like, when someone says this is bad for you and we're trying that out, because it's not always true, but often it is true. We can step away from feeling like a small child, being told what we can't do and getting compliant and then rebellious about it, and move into taking it like an adult and go, okay, that's poisoning me, that's taking me away from my true purpose in life, that's bringing me towards wasting my life, and therefore I don't want it. It's nothing to do with should, it's nothing to do with I'm not allowed. There's no one to rebel against. What am I going to do? Am I going to rebel against my true purpose in life? No true purpose in life. I just want to sit here, watch TV, and eat cake. It's like, well, what's the point, right?
So you kind of just reminded me of Eddie Izzard when you did the cake thing. I was like, oh. But I mean, you're bringing up a really important aspect, I believe, too, of just getting perspective, too, because I mean, I can speak for myself on this. I definitely had what seems like a different lifetime ago of habits, whether it was drinking or this or that or the other thing, and realizing that if I'm going to do X, then Y is going to happen. If I'm going to drink, I'm going to feel like crap. If I'm going to go out and eat cake and party all weekend, then I'm most likely going to be unproductive the following week, or I'm going to have to go through that drudgery of having to like get myself amped up again. So aligning with your true purpose and understanding what your goals are and making the correlations. And the old model, you know, like not depending, so to speak, on the doctor or having somebody else fix us, but really being in tune with our own body and being able to make those different correlations and tweaks and, you know, fine tuning different things to really just be who we are and fulfill what we're here to fulfill, if that's what I hear you saying.
Definitely, yeah, and I know the most common objection you get to this, by the way, Jess. So I'm just going to like deal with it before it even comes out, and that's, but I don't know what my true purpose is yet, right? This is what people get, or I don't know what I'm really here to do. And the answer to that, I would say, is okay. That doesn't mean that you can't ask the question. So still, when it comes to shall I sit down and eat this whole cake to myself, right? You can say to yourself, does this align with my true purpose in life? And you may not know what your true purpose in life is yet, but you can bet it doesn't include eating that whole cake right now, you know?
Right.
So you don't need to have this perfect clarity and goals, although that is wonderful, and I definitely obviously support that process. But you don't actually have to be at the place of complete clarity about what your life is all about. You can be pretty clear that it's not all about, you know, watching Jerry Springer all day or eating cake all day or whatever it is that people do these days. I have no idea. I'm so out of touch. But yeah, whatever it is people do, being on Facebook all day, right? Whatever it is that people do to waste time and poison themselves, you can be pretty clear that that's not your true purpose in life. So you can just say a big no to that one and then move on to that. What's important, which is if you don't know it, then what's important is discovering it, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's great. That really, really, really awesome. It's kind of, I definitely want to get in a couple of questions about herbs because that's one of the things that within the past few years I've just been mildly to greatly obsessed with. From everything from all kinds of different ginsengs. I mean, I went through a ginseng phase where I just, any ginseng I could get my hands on, the older the better. You know, it's just like I was spending more money on ginseng, I think, than anything else, but for a good reason. And so what, for somebody just getting into herbalism, you know, besides, you know, self-study and picking up some books and understanding how to really use the herbal system, what would you say to someone who says, say someone asks you, what are like 2 or 3 herbs I can start to take? And let's just maybe hone it in a little bit. Say they have a relatively active lifestyle. So they're into performance, maybe they use their brain a lot. So they're into physical performance and mental performance. They eat pretty clean, so they're responsive. And they're just looking to maybe get an edge, you know, maybe looking to get a little bit ahead and to have maybe a little bit more focus, a little bit more stamina, and a bigger picture of what their life goals are, something like that.
Okay. Well, there's a couple of different intents there, but yeah, I think I can answer that. I would go for Schisandra. Schisandra for endurance, for building up your reserves, for mental clarity as well. It's just awesome. It's my favourite tonic herb of all. I really don't like the taste, to be perfectly honest with you, but it's still my favourite herb because it's just so incredibly effective and so incredibly powerful.
And if you just add one thing into like your favorite way to take it, when you say the herb, like Schisandra, would you say just eat the berries or find like an extract, or what would you say like ways to use it?
These days I only really use extract powders, I must be honest. I did a lot of messing about with whole herbs and all kinds of things in the past, but these days the extract powder quality that we get is so incredibly awesome that's all I use personally. However, if you can't get a decent extract powder, then I would recommend using whole Schisandra berries. I would recommend having it as a tea. Don't try and add it to food. It tastes, you know, the taste doesn't go with anything, in my opinion. Again, if you like it, great. But yeah, make sure the berries are good. Don't use old powdered berries, which is commonly what raw food kind of people sell. If that's kind of the audience that you have there, Jeff, partly. Go for like red or purple kind of plump berries. They should look more like blueberries than peppercorns. You know, if they're like black and shriveled.
Okay.
That's not what you want. And yeah, you can eat them whole. I'd say there's probably a slight benefit from hot water extraction, but not a lot. In terms of your life purpose and all that kind of thing that you talked about, I would say reishi is still the best. It's kind of an obvious answer to anyone who knows, but you know that's really what it's about. That's what it's for. I definitely, with that one, would recommend an extract as long as you can get a decent quality one, because it is such a pain to boil and it smells so bad when it's cooking. So if you get someone to do that for you, then awesome. Let's see, do we want one for kind of a little bit more of a yang jing kind of one then, like you said, for someone who's sporty or maybe into pushing themselves out there a little bit, something like that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if there's one with a dual action, maybe dual directional type of for the exertion, I guess you could say, for the effort, but also for the recovery. Is there anything that works like that?
Yeah, definitely. Probably the most powerful, and this is probably a weird choice, but I've given you two obvious ones, so I'll give you a weird one. Would be Polyrachis ant. The feedback I get about that is always just extraordinary.
Could you say the name again?
Polyrachis.
Oh, Polyrachis.
Ant. Yes.
Is that? Okay, yes, okay, cool. Sometimes your mic was going in and out, so I got it that time.
Okay, ant, right? A-N-T. That one is just in terms of like giving you more energy, in terms of giving you more endurance, like more sets at the gym, more out, more minutes being able to run before exhaustion, all the rest, more kind of sexual energy and virility and all that kind of thing. Ant is extraordinary in my opinion. There's a lot of talk these days about deer antler, for instance, are being used for that formula. I would say ant is 10 times as effective from my experience and from hearing back from clients, and actually cheaper as well. So, two benefits in one there. Just probably a little bit less appealing, but from that kind of level. But yeah, really, really powerfully effective. Maybe some things. Do you want a little bit more explanation about what that is, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So ant is like the insect, like the ants, like the things that you don't want crawling around in your kitchen cupboard.
Yeah.
The type that you buy in Chinese medicine is like very, very particular species of ant. It's grown in very particular circumstances in a very pristine environment in kind of these big, kind of wild, kind of not ant farms. So they're clean and relatively pure, and they just have extraordinary like nutritional benefits, including zinc, far more than anything else, which is what makes them the kind of sporty, kind of weightliftery, kind of appealing herb. And vitamin B12 as well. I would say, just to go back to your earlier question about meat eating, for instance, for people who feel like they need meat and otherwise they don't have the same level of energy or virility or endurance, but who don't like the idea of cows being tortured or whatever, ant is like an awesome option. Like, for instance, my uncle's like he's late 50s now. He's been a meat eater all his life. Like, he was a hunter, right? Drank alcohol all his life with meals, like not the kind of person to want to go on a vegetarian diet at all. But he decided he wanted to anyway to kind of clean out his body. And so I recommended Polyrachis ant to him, and he started having that. And he was just fine. He'd cut out meat, no problem whatsoever, didn't feel any lack or any craving. He said a few days after he ran out and forgot to tell me, he was walking past a kebab shop, which is like strips of lamb that we have commonly over here. It was like suddenly he was like salivating again at the idea of eating meat. And then he had the ant again, and straight away he didn't feel like he needed the meat again. So it gives you whatever it is in meat. You can get super concentrated in ant. And by the way, I don't think what's really in meat has been understood yet. It's not the protein, obviously. You can easily get that somewhere else. It's not really the B12, because you can get that in a supplement. It's usually not really the iron, because you can get, say, angstrom ionic iron, which will replace that in the majority of cases. So there's something else. Some people talk about androgens, right? Maybe it's that. Maybe there's something else. Whatever it is, ant contains it, right? And in a very, very, very concentrated form. So you only need a couple of capsules or half a teaspoon, something like that, a day, and you've got the same benefit as you would from having a steak or two.
I tell you, anytime I've taken ant, I usually open up the capsules and put it in tea because I like the taste of it. And I tend to surprise my friends. Like, I'll put the ant extract. I usually get tea garden stuff, so I'll open up his ant and I'll put it in with whatever, like eucomium and some other things, and I'll make a really nice tea. And I have to just let them drink it first. They drink it, they feel great, and then I tell them what's in it, and they give me that look of disgust, like, you just gave me ant. You know what I mean? Like, that look, like, what the did you just give me, kind of thing. But they love how they feel when they drink it, and the taste isn't that bad either if you combine it right. Yeah. So, I mean, I can attest that the ant is definitely, for me, that's a huge one. When I know whenever I have that, I love it. So thanks for that reminder. That was really awesome.
You're welcome. I'll tell you a story about that. I had an ex-girlfriend of mine. She had a 2-year-old son at the time, and he would actually eat it by the teaspoonful. We would get it, not extract, like whole ant powder I managed to get my hand on. He'd just like dip it in, and You just love it. He was like totally charged from it. So just goes to show like the innocence of children, right? They don't know that it's bad, that it's dirty. They just going for it.
Plus, on some level too, he probably knew, or she probably knew, that it was really good for them, like that for their body. They were like, "Ooh, I need this,"
Yeah.
and didn't get into the whole intellectual thing of, "Whoa, that's gross," or "Oh, that's weird." Because kids will eat bugs anyways when they're out playing around. I watch my baby do that all the time. She's like, so awesome. Well, that's really what I had for today, man. That was really, really helpful, and